Ramrod and Naomi are in the cargo bay he calls home when Chakotay arrives to grab some booze. Contraband? Possibly, but the main reason he's hidden it here is so that Neelix doesn't nick it. If the prospect of the second-in-command getting blotto on Space Cider concerns you, then don't worry. He's sharing it with the captain, so they'll only be half cut. Or perhaps not, as a bit of the old shaky interrupts their already interrupted meal, Janeway's replicator being in pieces on the floor of her quarters. We've left Kim in charge, so there's a chance he just forgot how to put the ship in gear. That would explain why he doesn't know what's causing the shaky. Janeway goes up to take over while Chakotay checks on engineering. Seven jumps in with an answer of sorts. A wibbly is opening in front of us, and she uses the word chronitons, so we're probably in for some time fuckery. Naive of me to hope we'd get through the last season without any, I suppose. The time wibbly does an Emperor Palpatine on Voyager, most keenly felt in engineering, where Chakotay is cocking about on a console, despite B'Elanna telling everybody to get out. He's hit by warp lightning and has a bit of a nap, which is his own bloody fault as far as I'm concerned. B'Elanna takes a bit more pity on him than me, possibly because half his face has gone all old and shit. We teleport him to sickbay, which I'm not convinced is the best choice when we just had a massive electrical surge, but it's not my life, so bugger it. Chakotay wakes to find himself being checked by the doc. He's in one piece, which is a win, and no longer has two different ages on his face, which is another. The face thing was because his body was in a state of temporal flux, which is to say time fuckery. Not to worry though, as it's all fixed now. There's no news from anywhere else on the ship, not helped by the doc being unable to contact the bridge. Probably best if we go check, as other people may be injured. Chakotay tells the doc to transfer to his mobile emitter and join him. Slight problem, he doesn't have a clue what a mobile emitter is. And come to think of it, he's been a bit more irascible during this scene too, somewhat like his old self. It would appear the time fuckery has affected more than Chakotay's noggin. Unless he's still unconscious. He leaves the dock and goes to the bridge alone, though the lift passes through a wibbly on the way and deletes his medkit. I suspect the time fuckery is not constant. That might explain why Janeway orders him to be detained as soon as she sees him. After all, the appearance of the marquee captain that she's just been sent to capture on her ship, right as their systems have gone screwy, is obviously not a coincidence. He's clearly here for sabotage, what with him being the best person for the job and all, thanks to having absolutely no easily recognisable features. He tries to explain and is ignored, but it's fine because the guards taking him to the brig disappear as soon as they hit that wibbly in the lift. Now that he's alone, he diverts the lift to engineering. With a bit of luck, it'll be in a more useful time zone. Or maybe it'll be when Seska took over the ship with the Kazon back at the end of Season 2. Oh dear. Seska's got even less time for Chakotay's explanation than Janeway. She assumes it's an attempt to retake the ship, so Chakotay uses that instead and tells her she'll be locked out of everything important soon. Cue some gun pointing and threats of getting murderized if he doesn't stop it. Looks like this is what he wanted, as he uses the chance to grab a gun from a guard and start pooping. Feels like this plan has a whole lot of variables to me, but we're in a Chakotay episode, so I suppose he's got double plot armor. To the upper level of engineering we go via a ladder, at the top of which Chakotay decides to throw his gun for literally no fucking reason at all. Handy that he did though, as it manages to find another of those time wibblies. He looks as surprised by this as the rest of us, though his expression could be shock at the writers thinking this method of discovery made any sense whatsoever. He runs through the wibbly as Seska starts shooting, but rather than everything changing, he can still see Seska and the Kazon. Whatever's causing the time fuckery isn't switching the whole ship, but rather creating pockets through which Chakotay can watch. I suspect this will become an important plot element. Seska thinks somebody disappearing into the ether qualifies as a bit odd, and rather than follow, starts scanning for reasons. Good to know that somebody on Voyager wants to science this out, even if it is a Cardigan spy rather than a member of Starfleet. While she's looking for answers, Chakotay climbs up 7 decks worth of Jeffries tubes to visit the dock again. They have a bit of a chat to make sure all the viewers are aware of what's going on, and establish that the treatment given to Chakotay is why he's able to pass through the wibblies while nothing else can. As an aside, that means he should be arriving in each new time zone stark bollock naked, but let's ignore that forever. Chakotay wants to take a batch of medicine with him so he can enlist some help, and the doc says he can use the same principles to make a case for the spray so it'll survive the transition. Does that make any sense if the internal components are normal? Not really, but sod it. Chakotay needs someone he can trust, so naturally he chooses the person for whom the last 7 years hasn't happened yet and subsequently thinks he's just a terrorist saboteur. Some personal information that he shouldn't know gets her interested enough to listen, especially given one of her crew disappeared when they hit a time wibbly in a corridor. She's almost ready to buy it, but wants Kim to check the spray he's shown her with a deeper scan to make sure it's not poison. That would take literally minutes, though, and Chakotay gets bored easily, so he just takes Janeway hostage instead. They exit through the side door of her ready room, revealing a whole set of corridors, ones that we perhaps shouldn't think about too hard, lest we realise that they wouldn't fit on Deck 1. He injects Janeway and steps through the time wibbly, leaving the guard who was supposed to protect her with some very difficult questions to answer. Janeway watches him panic at her disappearance from the other side of the time wibbly. That she's still alive is a pretty solid argument for the spray not being poison, so it's time to get some answers from Chakotay while they move to astrometrics, not least of which because Voyager from her time doesn't have an astrometrics. He shares a lot more than he really should do with her, until she tells him to shut up because of spoilers. Speaking of spoilers, we get some ourselves, or would do if time-fuckery episodes didn't generally end in a complete reset. Ramrod and Naomi are all grown up and operating astrometrics together, and I note they both saw promotions before Kim. In fact, a few things have changed since Chakotay and Janeway died 17 years ago. Presumably that was when the ship got split up into separate time zones, 37 of them according to future Naomi. Somehow they've still managed to maintain a command structure and ship systems for 17 years, so it can't be all that bad. Still, Janeway wants to fix it, and thinks the best way would be to find a section with the time zone that Chakotay's from, back when all this started. Unfortunately, that particular area is proper messed up, says future Ramrod. Failing that, Seven's out there somewhere, and maybe she can help. Well, they assume she's out there anyway. Perhaps she was in a section that got sent back to before she was on board. The best place to look is her cargo bay, so that's our first port of call. Our search for Borg turns up more than we'd anticipated, this apparently being during the events of Scorpion. We find Seven, and after introductions, she helps us by sharing how Borg ships deal with the time fuckery of transwarp Watsits. Why is there still Borg 7 of 9 helping us? No idea, but that's today's theme, so let's just go with it. Anywho, the time shield used on Borg ships might work for us here, and give Chakotay a chance to fix things. A small chance, that is, as it'll only work for a few seconds. We decline the offer of joining Seven's mini-collective to make things more efficient, and set off to work on that time shield thing. The time shield will require injecting Voyager's biological circuit stuff with the same juice Chakotay and Janeway have running through them, so the docs replicated a whole batch of it, and some time-immune bandoliers to carry it. If it's that easy to replicate, maybe we should start making all of our ships with the stuff so we never have to deal with any more time-fuckery episodes. The Doc also starts spilling the beans about all that's happened to Voyager since he was brought online, before Chakotay jumps in and tells him to stop. That doesn't stop Janeway asking Chakotay himself as they fiddle with a gel pack in a corridor, though the interruption of a buzz monster from Season 2's Macrocosm shuts down the conversation as they scarper through a time wibbly. Tangentially, it's at this point that I realise giving everything a silly name makes retrospective episodes a right pain in the arse. To another section we go, this time the holodeck. Thankfully it's not Fairhaven, but that does mean we have to deal with henchmen and Chaotica. It must be after we last saw them, as once we've been captured by henchmen, Chaotica recognises Janeway as Arachnia, Queen of the Spider People. He's a bit pissed at her, what with her murdering him the last time they met, but some fawning from Janeway after being prompted by Chakotay manages to convince him that she's here to apologise, and as proof, she wants to stop his enemies from sabotaging his evil lair. All he has to do is inject this special potion into that weird bag behind those rocks, the one put there by his enemies. Sounds dodgy as all buggery to me, but at least Chaotica going for it is in keeping with the character, so we'll let them off. He frees her and Chakotay so they can go and cure the rest of his territory for him. The next stop is a teleporter room, made somewhat more complicated by it being inhabited by B'Elanna and some friends in their marquee outfits. This time zone is just after the Arraean caretaker gets kaboomed from the sounds of it, but at least Chakotay is trusted by B'Elanna, so this is a relatively easy one. The conversation about why B'Elanna reacts so badly to seeing Janeway is more difficult, but we've got a job to do, so let's ignore it. Time for the mess hall and a vision of a possible future. I'm guessing it's not long after the events that started the episode, though it's possible Paris could be referring to a completely different Wibbly when he says this is what caused all the injuries. Chakotay deals with the gel pack while Janeway watches Tuvok do a dead. Bit rude when this is the first we've seen of him, but it won't matter in 10 minutes, so bugger it. Janeway doesn't know we're going to be hitting the big red reset button though, which is why she wants to do it herself. All of this weird shit happened because she got them all stuck in the Delta Quadrant, so if they can reset time to her time zone, she can prevent it from happening and save everyone. Well, not everyone, obviously. She can't stop Chakotay's ship getting pulled into the Delta Quadrant, and if she follows it to save them, a fair chunk of her own crew are going to die in the process, but let's ignore that for now. Erasing that timeline would be erasing everything positive that's happened though, and Chakotay explains some of it. It's a shorter list than the people who've carked it, and he leaves out the bit where she'd done a murder, but the speech is good enough to convince her, so we get back to the original plan. Unfortunately, that original plan involves working with Seska. She listens, and perhaps because she was the one willing to actually science this shit when she discovered it, believes his story. It's all a bit too easy though, and the other foot drops when she tells him she's modifying the plan. She's going to make Voyager snap back to her time zone so she can have another go at trying to keep the ship. The fact that Chakotay is from 5 years after she tried means she must have failed, so she's got nothing to lose. The eagle-eyed among you may have noticed Janeway isn't here. That's because she's watching from the separate time zone on Engineering's upper level, the one we predicted would be an important plot element. And she's brought friends too, having gone back to other time zones to inject Paris and Kim. They jump down and we all have a bit of a wrestle, but Janeway believes in fighting dirty, so she's invited every bugger else as well. There are very few Starfleet problems that can't be solved with overwhelming force, and Janeway being grabbed by Seska isn't one of them. It stops the fight briefly, but that changes with the arrival of Seven. Pooping does nothing and Seska's quickly disarmed. Not that Janeway dying would have meant anything when we're resetting all the time zones, but it's the thought that counts. Seska and the Kazon are secured in the Jeffries tubes, B'Elanna apparently believing that the best place to store enemies is where all the unprotected critical systems can be accessed. To be fair, that's not even close to being the silliest part of the episode. Everybody files out, giving Janeway a chance to ask if she and Chakotay are more than just good friends. It's a hell of a question when she's still engaged at this point, and Chakotay says they never banged because he's diplomatic enough to be a massive lying bastard. We do the science thing and Chakotay finds himself back in Engineering before the Time Wibbly did lightning to us. He has just long enough to order B'Elanna to do a different science and deflect the lightning, erasing the last 40 minutes just like we usually do in time fuckery episodes. Janeway asks Chakotay what the bloody hell just happened when he reaches the bridge, and he waves it away as not being allowed to tell her before suggesting they return to their meal. I guess Janeway got the replicator working again, though not very well from the food remaining on their plates. Post-meal drinks give her a chance to try needling Chakotay for more data on what happened, and we leave the two most senior officers on the ship to get wankered on contraband cider as we fly away. I'll say this for time zone shenanigans, at least it's not a clip show. We get to see the greatest hits, only with something new from them too. Fan service isn't enough to carry a story, though. That's a lesson we should have learned from the Season 3 episode Flashback, yet here we are again. IMDb tells me that this is generally a highly rated episode, and for the life of me, I can't quite understand why. It's good to get an overview of the last 6 seasons, of course, and another chance to see Seska is always welcome. She remains the best option Voyager ever had for a nemesis, in my opinion, one that would have been far more interesting than yet more Borg. But those nods towards nostalgia, welcome though they may be, are papered over significant gaps in the plot. Things happen without any real logic to them, convenience trumping narrative to fit in a bit more fan service. Chakotay's gun throw discovery is probably the worst offender. He's already climbed most of the ladder and holding something didn't stop him from getting there. He's being chased by combatants, so disarming makes no sense on any level. It's not to test for time wibblies, as he's surprised by the result and had no way of knowing beforehand either. It's just pure bollocks, and the real bugger of it is that it had such an easy solution. Seska already shoots up the ladder after him. If he'd still been holding the gun, it could have been shot out of his hands to the same effect. Gun flies through the air, Webley discovered, dive through, job's a good 'un. A far more organic piece of storytelling, and one that was right there. I don't understand why we went for something that makes far less sense. Seven's acceptance that time fuckery has happened isn't difficult to believe, as the Borg arse around with such things on the reg. What doesn't work is the immediacy with which she defaults to assisting the Voyager crew. At this point in the series, she's still hostile, held back only by the most tenuous of truces. A few lines from her about how circumstances have changed and their alliance is no longer valid, countered by Chakotay and Janeway convincing her that they're her best chance of returning to the collective, would have been all it took to explain Seven's willingness to assist. Again, we just ignore it. They join a list of things we're expected to just take on faith for the plot to continue. How does anything work when critical parts of the ship are in different time zones? How have future Ramrod and future Naomi joined Starfleet and been promoted? How did Chakotay's initial teleport to sickbay across time zones even work before he was treated with the time medicine? I'm a strong proponent of making concessions for the plot, something we've discussed a few times here before. I'm willing to overlook much if the underlying framework is sound, but there are so many holes in this one that the episode suffers significantly as a result. There's a chance that's because I'm reviewing these, of course, holding them under a microscope not wielded by those who simply enjoy it for what it is. I can't help but note that hasn't stopped me from appreciating other flawed episodes, though. I can see the value in Bride of Chaotica when most people can't, whilst also seeing that those people's opinions are perfectly valid. Maybe this is the opposite. Maybe most people can see the entertainment that I'm missing. Whatever the reason, this one fell flat for me. That's a real shame, as a memorable greatest hits compilation in the final season could have been a welcome reminder of all the ways in which Voyager has pleasantly surprised me. Instead, it serves as another example of the times Voyager has come close to greatness, only to be let down by cut corners or missed opportunities. End of episode.
You know that we are being targeted by shapeshifters?
Yeah, of course I do.
And they've already tracked us down once?
Pretty quickly too, I was impressed.
So we need to be as low-key as possible.
Makes sense, mate. Best way to stay safe.
Space Dog?
Yeah?
What's that on the table?
Which table?
The one we're next to.
Well, I don't know. Could be lots of things on it. I'm not exactly built to see what's up there, am I?
Did you put a kill counter on the table?
No, of course I didn't put a kill counter on the table. I mean, why would I put up... Alright, yes.
God damn it. Woof.